Before I destroy Corey Lewandowski some more, I just want to make sure that you guys are understanding what I am alleging here and how serious it is. A sitting governor funneling money to Corey Lewandowski in the Trump administration this entire time. It's the only reason we have her as DHS secretary, because nobody decided to step up and investigate when they should have. So we're going to go ahead and let the Senate and Congress know about it. So I just got to the part where Kristi Noem convinced businesses to give her $250,000 so she could funnel it back to Corey Lewandowski. Lewandowski's participation in these barter transactions is also easily quantifiable and present themselves as what I believe to be a both in-kind payment and a quid pro quo transaction. Lewandowski and Noem's administration allege that he was working for Noem as a consultant for free. Reports indicate he was being paid $20,000 per month by Donald Trump when he was a candidate. No reasonable person would believe he is now doing charity work for a sitting governor with unlimited access to funds, especially when countless conduits were forged to direct funds to enterprises by which he is directly associated. To imagine that a sitting governor would receive such a high-value favor without a quid pro quo caveat that would interfere with her policies and gubernatorial duties to her state, as they often conflicted with the interest of the ongoing national campaign, is asinine. Lewandowski made his career as a policy advisor. Policy is Lewandowski's currency. Obstructing justice and impeding commerce. If it seemed personal, it doesn't even begin to get personal for me until now. It's time to circle back to that 2024 flood that impacted my community, that is still suffering immensely from the previously mentioned Transitions Studio documentary, okay? The other Ohio-based company we were kicking some money to. Prepare to connect the dots with yet another meandering web of lies and corruption, operating under the assumption that Lewandowski was offering policy advice, and that it was abundantly clear what role Noem would be tapped for given a Trump victory, as evidenced by her fierce campaign against the immigrant population and her, Doug Burgums, and other far-right MAGA politicians in the Midwest coining the phrase, "every state is a border state," in order to be more appealing on the national stage to a voter base that vehemently opposes immigration and positioned it as their number one issue in 2024. This, of course, is well orchestrated by Heritage Foundation, other big money lobbyists, and architects of Project 2025 that were committed to getting Trump loyalists into key cabinet positions. See Exhibit J. I'm on page 9, and we're already to J, with parenthetical citations of other evidence. In 2021, Willis and Reba Johnson of Tennessee, note the same state that Noem jet set off to when the flood was happening here, in 2024, gave $1 million to send 50 South Dakota National Guardsmen to the U.S.-Mexico border despite having no jurisdiction and no mission. Allowing private citizens to pay for the deployment because they dislike brown people was as highly unethical and faced legal challenges and controversy, of course. In South Dakota, there is no accountability. We do not have a legal apparatus here. This was nothing more than optics and advertisement for Noem to the rest of the country. Like Noem always does when she creates controversy, everyone obeys in advance and her tactics become even more overt. In 2023, in a unique, one-of-a-kind, never-before-done gift to Governor Greg Abbott, he's going to come into this too, Texas, Noem deployed the South Dakota National Guard to the southern border again, this time by transferring funds out of the state's natural disaster and emergency funding. This meant that there was no National Guard to evacuate and protect South Dakota when the two rivers were rapidly cresting at unprecedented levels. They've never been this high before. For context, the National Guard has been deployed in every other major flood, with water levels far lower than this. She had knowledge of this devastating event by late June 19th, early June 20th, 2024. She continued to downplay the event. You cannot convince me or any other reasonable American that Lewandowski, Transition Studios, and Musk were not advising her not to tell everybody how bad this was going to be, because her little documentary that was airing that evening would not have performed well. While en route to Tennessee, the county and city quietly constructed a levee to wipe out homes and property of people that did not live in the floodplain to protect a wealthier neighborhood and a business district that Noem had personal interests in, including an empty lot dedicated to Noem's workforce housing. Yep, because she also, at this point, decides to divert funding from housing and urban development and the Department of Labor to build the scam workforce housing to enrich specific contractors. The devastation to my community and significant loss of homes and property is unimaginable to those that have not seen it in person. Despite the incredible devastation, our community still could not get the National Guard because they were deployed. But adding insult to injury, she used all of our emergency funding. That is right. Our lawmakers looked at us and said, we've got zero in the coffers. No help ever came. She refused to declare a national disaster for 2 months, meaning that hundreds of people that were now homeless and even more that were displaced and had lost everything they ever owned didn't even so much as get the $750 in emergency payments until late August, early September. The state could not even offer dirt and basic repairs. Subsequently, this community is still sliding into a mud pit. They just announced last week plans to begin cleaning the toxic lake debris. It has been 11 months. Waiting beyond the 30 days to declare a disaster not only violated the Stafford Act and obstructed access to funds American taxpayers were entitled to, it also barred virtually any other grants victims may have been eligible for that demand an application within 30 days from when the disaster occurred, not when it's declared. How the community got any FEMA aid per current laws in the midst of her dereliction of duty is beyond me, but it absolutely warrants an investigation. She knew in June what position she'd be tapped for. In a wild twist to this story, a couple of the businesses in the business district that were protected by the makeshift levy were currently convicted and currently charged in active RICO cases for traveling to South America and trafficking people into their facilities where they were subsequently abused. To be clear, a community of homeowners that had their homes deliberately taken out by an administration to protect businesses that had trafficked people from the southern border. And they were not entitled to legal protection in the Stafford Act or their own National Guard because those resources were at the border, because that was Noem's biggest issue. Additionally, during my investigation, I found evidence of intimidation and bribery of the city council members and Union County. Community members were becoming increasingly enraged because Noem had stated that she did not send the National Guard to request FEMA because the city and county had not requested it. The flooded town and city with hundreds of newly homeless residents could not understand why the city was not helping, particularly because the city itself offered zero help. No grants, no cleanup, not so much as water bottles or tarps. Making matters worse, this particular city is split in half with one side in Iowa. Iowa had the National Guard, FEMA, and countless tents from MPOs and other groups that were dispatched to help the Iowa side. The city remained oddly silent. It was the most bizarre thing I had ever witnessed. I did a deep dive of city council minutes from all impacted communities. I had a private off-the-record conversation with the city council member. The truth is that they did request the National Guard, and they did request FEMA. However, as time went on, they feared that they needed to stay in Kristi Noem's good graces in order to get anything at all from the state. I turned this evidence over to the Washington Post, and you can read more about that in this article. Had the Senate done any investigation into the decades of misconduct by Noem, it would have prevented any reasonable representative from allowing such an irresponsible appointment. This lack of scrutiny is not merely an oversight, it is a dereliction of the Senate's constitutional duty to advice and consent.